I press record again. Sorry about that. I just disappeared.
You were so horrified about talking about neurodiversity that you just switched off.
I don't know what, it just literally died. Oh, I hope my laptop, don't let this start happening now. Like, I'm a conference. I have had this laptop for like 8 or 9 years.
Ouch.
I know, I love it, but like, it's overworked. Like, I use it every day, but I'm like, I'm afraid to, like, I have another one, but it's not a MacBook, and I just don't like using it. But yeah, I'm kind of hoping it's not on its last legs and it'll die now on the morning of the 15th of November, just before we do the conference. So fingers crossed this kind of stuff doesn't happen. But look, I'm back now anyway. That's the main thing. But yeah, we were talking about neurodiversity.
Yeah.
I kind of see people think neurodiversity is, they see, because I've seen people commenting or kind of writing about it, and it's kind of like, they think people like you and me are saying, we're okay, we should be accepted, but we're leaving out all of these other autistic people with maybe higher needs. And I'm like, I don't know where that idea has come from.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's, I don't either. And I think people talk about neurodiversity like it's controversial.
Yeah.
And it isn't. It's a fact of life. You know, it's that different humans have different brains and work a little bit differently. That's not a controversial thing to say.
Yeah,
all of us, and that's not just like autistic people or select groups of autistic people. This is all humans all around the world. You know, it's that you look at every other aspect of living existence. So you look at plants or animals or whatever, every type of species has within it subspecies that look a little bit different or act a little bit different. They're still part of the same species. They just look a bit different or act a bit different. And that's what neurodiversity explains. That's it. There's no wild kind of excluding like message coming out of this or anything like that. But it's been twisted. And I think because this is an idea and a concept that has come from autistic people, that some people are quite resistant to that. Especially it's around the kind of people, you know, you are not like my child kind of people, the people that think like that and don't actually understand that just because we maybe are able to speak, or just because we don't have an associated learning disability or intellectual disability, that, or a perceived one at least, that makes us somehow very, very different people, and we have no relatable experience to anybody else. And it's messy, and it's almost become political. I mean, everything is political, but it's almost become like a bit of a political football being booted around between different groups. And it shouldn't be like that. It doesn't need to be like that. It's a concept that actually is more inclusive than any other concept.
Yeah.
And it, you know, and it's about, just because somebody's life from the outside looking in looks difficult does not mean that they don't have a valid life or can't have a valid life. Just because it looks different to what someone might expect it to look like does not mean that it's not valid. But that is the idea that undermines at the edge of neurodiversity, that people bite at neurodiversity with, because they think just because someone is disabled, their life holds less value.
Yeah.
And that's really what's underpinning all of this thought, that it's people are scared of their children or their children being excluded, when in actual fact it's the opposite. It's the fear that's stopping the inclusion and the acceptance, and not the actual idea.
Yeah, that's very true. It probably is. I think most of I think a lot of things come down to fear, don't they?
Yeah.
And this is no different. I think it's how we look at disability and things as well.
Yeah.
You know, because people, you know, I like, you know, I've had people kind of say, oh, it's okay for you, but what about the severely autistic? I'm like, well, don't mourn them either. You know, like, first of all, there is no severely autistic people. We have autistic people who, like you said, and you know, the more I talk to maybe non-speakers or you know, talk to people in the community, like it seems more it's motor issues that people have but have been diagnosed with intellectual disability.
Yeah, and it's things like apraxia of speech and things like that. Oh, I'm getting awful feedback. I can hear myself now. I don't know why.
I thought someone had. I thought you meant like feedback. Someone said something to you.
No. But no. It's again. It's kind of, you know, this idea that something that, you know, people have this fixed idea of what autism is, but lots of people have this fixed idea that it is an umbrella term and that all these other things are shoved underneath, which then makes them autism. But that's not how this works at all. And it's a real mixed message that's come out, and it hasn't actually come out of professional thinking so much as it's been a kind of social and cultural message that's mixed these things up and complicated these ideas. But it is really important to define what is autism and what are co-occurring conditions. And that doesn't dismiss anybody. What it is actually saying, this is something tangible right here, and this is another tangible thing right here. And those two interact. And if we can help support this thing, that thing works a lot better. You know, so it's about identifying need rather than saying, well, you know, this person's severe, because that doesn't even mean anything. That could mean a whole conundrum of different things. And when you get down to the nitty gritty, it's that all of this is about supporting people in the right way. And at the moment, people aren't supported in the right way, no matter what their needs are. So if we can start really pinning down what their needs really are, we can start making moves to support them. And it's, and again, this isn't complicated. This shouldn't be a challenging idea. It's not controversial, but it's made controversial by people who are scared and are angry at a world that doesn't give them the right support. I mean, these are parents I'm talking about now who aren't supported the right way, and their children aren't supported in the right way.
And they're not, you know, I mean, they're not. And I mean, some people need 24/7 care. Then that carer needs respite, that carer needs support, you know. So the question is, why aren't we supporting people the way we should, instead of like blaming, you know, whatever condition somebody has? You know, it is a social issue, isn't it? Like,
and that's the problem. And it's kind of, and amongst that, people assume, well, people think through that fear that because they haven't got the support that they need, that the problem is within their child. The problem is within the reason that their child is having these difficulties. When in actual fact, if the right support was in place, that doesn't mean that disabilities go away, doesn't mean that anything is kind of taken away or anything's fixed. But what it does mean is that people's lives get that bit easier. And it's about, as a parent and as a carer, if your children are well supported and you are equipped to support them well in the way that they really need, not the way that people think they need, but in actual the way that they really need, then, you know, you are going to emotionally, physically and mentally going to feel a lot better about yourself and a lot better about the situation that you're in. And it might not be as hard. But when you're constantly rallying, and I do understand that when people are constantly fighting for support that doesn't exist, you're just going to scattergun and attack anyone that looks like they're trying to take like their focus away from you and away from your child. But in actual fact, that's not the case. They're not hearing the right message that's being said. And maybe that's a problem that comes from us. Maybe we're not projecting the right message in the right way. Maybe we have to work harder at doing that. But something needs to give somewhere. And, you know, there is no us and them. There is no dividing line. We're all in the same situation together. We're all fighting for support. That doesn't mean we need to be competing against each other as well, though. So, and at the moment, you know, if you were looking at a hierarchy of people who are listened to, parents are listened to more than autistic people. We are underneath them in the hierarchy. So if we're punching up, parents punching down at us isn't going to help. You know, and when we're punching up, we're not punching up at parents, we're punching up at the situation. And that's the nuance that's kind of missed in all of this.
Yeah, you know, because I had a really interesting conversation with somebody a few weeks ago about just all of this, and like even taking neurodiversity and autism out of it, just how people are divided. And it's like, that's literally what we do. It's like, well, if we're all divided, well, then we're all squabbling amongst ourselves. And do you know what I mean? It's like, and you know, I kind of, because it kind of strikes me at times that I'm nearly othering us autistics. You know what I mean? Because we're talking about how different we are all of the time. You know, so I mean, anything I start with now, and I suppose that has been kind of where I suppose in the last year or two is like, we're human. You know, start with that, and then talk about similarities, and then you know what, we do have a few differences. Here they are, and you know, this is what we can do about them. But I think sometimes, like, we're putting ourselves in boxes now sometimes as well. You know, kind of and you know,
it's interesting because actually in the talk that I'm doing for Awesome Conference, I cover a lot of, like, it's about this. It's about identity and how identity is kind of created, because it's kind of, you know, we create, there's kind of three ways that we create an identity. Firstly, it's about us and about what we want and what we want to project to the world. Secondly, it's about modulating that in order so that other people accept us. And thirdly, it's about how other people perceive us and how we perceive other people perceive us as well, which makes it even more complicated. And when you've got this whole dynamic going on, we do other ourselves. We absolutely other ourselves. Any person from a marginalized group others themselves, because that difference is the real important thing to highlight. It's important to recognize, yes, we are part of the same larger group, but also the thing that makes us different is the thing that you're oppressing us by. So, you know, it's such a complicated thing. And it is, you're right, we do put ourselves in boxes, but I guess at least to a degree they're our boxes. You know, they're boxes that we've made that we can have a little bit of control over. They're not boxes that other people are forcing us into. They're boxes that we're putting ourselves into to say, you know, this is who we are. And if you don't like that, you're going to have to deal with that, because that's not our problem. That's your problem as a kind of larger group. But yeah,
this is why I love talking to autistic people. See, I'll go in and have a big think about this. I'll be like, maybe I should read it. I love it. I have conversations that make me think afterwards. We do have some questions actually, Kieran. So Brian is asking us, would you advise people, this is a good question. Would you advise people to announce their diagnosis to family, friends, or work colleagues? You want to talk about, go on, give us your opinion.
Yeah, no. It's obviously a very, very individual choice depending on your situation, your personal situation. And also that changes depending on who you're going to be talking to as well. If you have, for instance, with family, some people are validated by all their family members who think it's wonderful and brilliant and want to learn more. Other people don't have that experience. So it's very much up to you to judge what kind of reaction you're going to get. You know your family. At the end of the day, and sometimes what you might feel is an answer to all of your questions actually creates more of a problem for other people that are around you. So it's about balancing that out, and it's also about how you introduce that as well, because if you feel that it's a positive thing for you and you go in with knowledge, you're able to talk clearly about why this is right for you and why this name and label fits your experiences, then you know you're going to come from a place of power to a degree in that dynamic in the relationship. But if you come in and you're uncertain and you're worried about how they're going to react and things, there's a good chance that you're going to get a negative reaction, or it's going to be like, oh, are you sure, or you don't look autistic, or all of those kind of things that are going to invalidate you further when you've spent years being invalidated already. And it's the same with work as well. You will know your employers and your colleagues. You have legal rights around your diagnosis. Unfortunately, those legal rights aren't always put in place, and you know it's in order to challenge that, we need to have strength to be able to challenge the things that we should just be given because we're legally allowed them. But so it is very, I wish I could give a yes or no answer, but it's very, very, very situational. Personally, for me, I mean, I'm unemployable now. I'd never go and work for anybody else. But if I did, I don't think I'd disclose, and that's because I have traumatic previous experiences of disclosing. It might be different now because I can advocate a lot better for myself now than I could when I was in my early 20s. But, you know, so it's very much depends on you, how confident you are, your amount of knowledge, and what you feel the reaction you're going to get from other people around you.
Yeah, I think you're right. It also depends on, you know, the particular people. It could be great to tell one friend and another friend can react differently. I suppose my own experience, my boss is sound. I've worked for myself for 20 years, so telling no problem. But for me, obviously if I'm doing autism training, you know, I'm telling people I'm autistic, you know, that are in the room with me, that's fine, you know, but, you know, I was, you know, teaching drama for so many years beforehand. And I'm like, I wonder, do these people know, you know, what do these people think of me being autistic and all the other stuff I do? And it does sometimes kind of, you know, you do wonder what other people are thinking. And I definitely think it's good to know yourself and to have the knowledge to answer those kind of questions and things that people do say. Like, don't label yourself. This kind of, you know, these kind of reactions you get. And I think it is good to take the time to kind of get to know yourself and have those answers for people.
Yes. I think that's really, really, really important, because it's kind of, other people aren't going to, as much as they might try, they're never going to be able to understand fully. So the more you can advocate for yourself and the more self-knowledge you have, the better the outcome's going to be. Even if someone tries to invalidate you, you can explain why they're wrong, and why it's not okay to think like that, and why that's actually quite hurtful. So, but again, that needs that confidence, doesn't it? And you need to know. And for most people that are newly diagnosed or recently diagnosed, you want to rush out and tell the world. You want to announce it to everybody, kind of thing. And particularly from your family, you want them to go, "Oh my God, that's amazing. What can I?" You want the response to be, "How can I help you? And what can I do to understand more?" Chances are you're probably not going to get that, because people have preconceptions about what autism is, and that's going to influence their reaction. So the better you can manage that and manage yourself, and you can't control other people, you can't control other people's reactions, but you can control who you tell, how you tell it, and why you tell them as well.
Yeah, and I think the why you tell people is important, because
it's got to be for you.
Yes, what you're looking for in return, because you have to be prepared that you may not get what you actually are needing at the moment. And I mean, I've had mixed responses from people. I've people who just like, "Oh yeah, grand, whatever." That just makes no difference. And but also when you find out you're autistic as an adult, like you change. You look. I mean, I have changed massively in the past 6 years, because I've got to know myself. So some people, that can affect friendships, because even just you're different. There's no way I would have been able to speak up for myself, say 6 years ago, whereas obviously now I do. I still don't feel comfortable having to do it, but I do it. So I think even not telling, just that change that comes can change dynamics in your friendships and then in different things. And I think that's just, life changes things. Sometimes I get sad about things and I'm like, but that's just part of life. And when someone leaves our life, someone new comes in, and it's just kind of, I think, looking at it like just a different time, different people come into our lives. But I know that can happen, and it can be hard as well. We have somebody else asking, Lee is asking about neurodiversity. So I should probably read the question before I read it out loud, but anyway, I'll try to.
Just in case.
Anyway,
we know Lee, it's okay, she's safe.
The psychiatric nurse who has been supporting me just wrote to me as part of our chat, among other things, neurodiversity may not be a term the medical profession use here in Ireland.
Yes, that's a statement more than a question, isn't it? But yeah, it's this is part of the problem, when you yourself and the way that you think is one way, and that there is a large group of people who support you and validate your experience and make you feel better about yourself, who also think that way, and then you butt heads with professionals who hold a lot of power over your life who don't think that way. And that there is a culture clash. More than anything, it's not a kind of it's not a deficit based thing. It's not that one person has more knowledge than another person. It's literally two cultures coming together and banging heads together. And what do you do when there is a culture clash? So if you are someone who has come from one country and gone to another country, you try and learn the language, and you hope that they learn the language back, and you translate, and you have tools at your hand to kind of make sure that you learn about the culture that you're going to be visiting, because it's going to be very different to yours, and you expect to be uncomfortable within that culture. And unfortunately, as autistic people, this is our existence all the time, because the other culture never learn about ours. So it's us doing the work all the time. So the way that you can mitigate that is with professionals, is giving them information. And blogs and things are really useful for that, if you can print out people's blogs. But the real killer in that is research, because if you're talking to professionals, they're going to be invested in research. So if you can put research in front of them which validates your experience, and there is a growing, a big body of research now that believes us, that has listened to us, and is actually looking into the concepts that we're talking about now. So if in front of professionals, if you can put research like that, that's really going to hopefully influence their thinking, and kind of make them think a little bit differently about things.
Yeah, I think having research to back stuff up is it's so important.
It's key.
you know, I was saying, we have our own social skills, we're fine, we can communicate just fine.
Yeah.
But now I have research to back it up, people take it a whole lot more seriously, you know. And also I think like it would be great to point professionals towards the conference.
It would, yes. Uh-huh.
Just, you know, but it is, and actually we have a lot of professionals signed up to come now, like, and it's brilliant because, particularly mental health professionals, because a lot of us are presenting with anxiety, with depression, with, you know, lots of, you know, being diagnosed with lots of different things, personality disorders, all sorts of things. And it's important that people are able to recognize when it's an autistic person's, you know, an adult maybe struggling, or a kid or a teen as well. There needs to be an awful lot more knowledge around that, really, doesn't there? I just find, like, because they're our first point of contact in a lot of cases, you know.
Yeah, and this is the problem with kind of frontline services, especially urgent kind of frontline services, that there is a massive amount of misunderstanding and misconception. And it all boils down to the fact that everything is modeled on non-neurodivergent people and non-neurodivergent people's behaviors and non-neurodivergent people's reactions. And this is the important thing about neurodiversity, because it forces you to realize that there is not one gold standard human being, that there are lots of people that are going to act in different ways because of how their neurology works. And there's very little understanding in the mainstream about how neurodivergent people react to trauma, react to anxiety. And that's not because that information isn't there, it's because it's never been looked for. We talk about it all the time, we know how those things express, but from the other point of view, it's pathologized as deficits and those kind of things, when in actual fact, that's the bit that needs to be normalized. I don't usually use that word, but you know, those things about us need to be normalized because they are human reactions, because we are human. And that's, you know, that's the bit that's always forgotten about. But that comes from that kind of, you know, we've done the talk around the kind of history of autism and stuff, and the thinking that came out of the 1960s around behavioralism, which reinforced the earlier pathologism around autism and how we were identified, has dehumanized us. We're not seen as fully human, we're not seen as fully working human beings. And that's now eked out into society, which then ekes back into professional thinking and all of that kind of stuff. So these are the bits that need to be unpicked, and these are the bits that need to be identified, that just because someone is reacting in a way that you don't recognize does not mean that there's something wrong with them. It just means that you don't recognize how they're acting or why they're acting the way that they are. So this takes the problem away from the person who's acting in that way and centers the problem in you as the observer. And that's the bit that's missed, and that's the bit that needs to change.
Yes. You said so much there.
I do that, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's great. Yes, there is. I'm just,
yes.
Sorry.
Just yes. Just say yes, right? We could do this as a really short live.
Anna, I think this is about the professionals not using neurodiversity as a term. Well, they should ask themselves, why don't they use the term, and who benefits from using positive language?
Exactly.
So true, Anna. And I don't know why there's such resistance to kind of learning new terms and things, you know.
It's almost like professionals are really rigid and don't like change.
Isn't that us, Kieran? Isn't that autistic?
But see, this is why understanding that, you know, we're all humans and reacting in human ways is really important. Because when researchers and when academics kind of look at us and say, oh, well, they don't like change and they've got very rigid behavior, and then they've been talking about that for 80 years without thinking about changing that, you know, they're not looking at themselves. They're not seeing that behavior in themselves. They're just looking at it in other people. So again, that comes back to that gold standard, that the way that they think is okay, but it's not okay for other people to think like that because they're right and we're wrong.
Yeah.
It's messy. Humans are messy.
But it's bizarre. And I talked to Owen Stevens, who's presenting at the conference. Like, we had the same conversation last week. It's just so bizarre, though. It's like, how can all of these people who are like experts and psychologists and psychiatrists and writing criteria just like not actually kind of go, wait a minute, that's like, you know, you know, a few years into me reading stuff, I was like, but that's a sign of anxiety, you know, and like literally just started piecing stuff
Yeah.
together, you know, and it's like, it's quite obvious, but I think it comes, I suppose there is that kind of, the way we treat professionals as well, you know, the way we kind of,
The
allow
deference we have for them.
Well, I was going to say the way people put them on pedestals.
Yeah, yeah, deference. It's the same. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said difference. Oh, there we go.
No.
Oh, difference. Stop using fancy words here. But yeah, but that's it. I think that plays a big part in it. Like it's, you know, we kind of allow them to kind of, you know, everything they say is true, and we put them up there, and that's not right either. You know, I mean, we should always be questioning what people are telling us. I think that's probably an autistic thing. Maybe it's a human thing.
I think it's an autistic thing.
You think so? Then we ask why,
Yeah.
but why? We're using that kid as well, but why?
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's really an autistic thing, because it's about conformity, and we don't conform.
Also, things have to make sense to us, Kieran. Like, I mean, you know,
I
and
know.
things have to be logical. So, like, if someone tells me this, I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me. And you know, I might have to go away and think about it, and it might make sense later. But if it just doesn't, you know, I think we have to have something that makes sense. Otherwise, it's just
it's about I think it's about like cognitive dissonance. So it's kind of something needs to make sense. In order for it to make sense, you need to have information about it, and then once you've got information about it, it makes sense. You have control over that. But there is so much around us that we don't have information for, and it's not because the information doesn't exist, it's because people gatekeep it. You know, and they often gatekeep it because they know that the information isn't adequate enough to explain it properly. But they don't want other people to think that. They want other people to know that they are the professionals and they do know what they're talking about. And it's kind of like, I mean, everything is a social construct. Literally everything is a social construct. And these hierarchies that we have are completely a social construct. Professionals are a social construct. They don't know everything. They can't stick like I said earlier, you know, it's like autism. Autism we're still using the same terms that Asperger and Canner used in the 1940s. It's like they stuck a pin in it and that's it now. It can't change. It can move maybe a little bit around there, but you know, we can't evolve 200 miles away from where it originated from, because then it wouldn't be autism anymore, you know? So it's like, I don't understand why it's such a scary thing to say, actually, everything we thought about this was completely wrong. Why is that a bad thing? We've made huge mistakes. We've messed it up. We were doing our best, but now we know better, so we can do things differently. Why do we just have to make little tinkers and little change things in tiny, tiny ways when we can just knock it all off the board and start again? Why is that such a bad thing?
I don't know, because I just think maybe it comes back to human nature. Some people just don't like being wrong and don't like apologizing, you know.
They don't like change.
They don't like any change at all, even if it's positive change. But that's it. You know, it's because that's what we need to do. I think we need to stop talking about autism. Like, and I have to use the word autism, otherwise people don't know what I'm talking about. You know? It's like if I start talking about being autistic, it means nothing to people, and people who don't know that then think, oh, don't use that word, and then you're like, oh, I'll try to explain. You know, it's not a bad word. It's actually a better word than autism, because autism is implying we have a condition, and being autistic isn't like being anything, like being a woman or being a man or being, you know, whatever. It just is the way someone is. You know, I would love to come up with a new word, like, you know, that's if we weren't autistic. Like if someone else had noticed stuff.
You're not going to ask me now, are you? What that was? You're going to ask me to make up a word, aren't you?
Yeah. You started it. You said deference. But yeah, I don't know. It'd be an interesting. If anyone watched it, like if we weren't called autistic, if it was like, if someone, I often think that like if a philanthropist or a philosopher or somebody, you know, started talking about autistic people, you know, well, I mean, people talk about empaths, and I think that is, we're talking about autistic people there too. It's just not seen as that, because it's, and the language used is so different.
Yeah.
You know, I found a description somewhere of an empath there recently, and it was like, you know, they find it difficult to concentrate with background noise. There was a few other sensory things, and, you know, feels people's feelings deeply. Very thoughtful. And I went, but that's an autistic person. That's because it didn't have the deficit language.
It wasn't stigmatized language.
No, it was just described. So, and I went, that's what an autistic person is. It's just literally using different language to describe us. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like what word would you have or invent? Sorry, totally off the cuff now. If you don't have one, it's fine. You can maybe announce it at the conference.
Yeah, I'll think about that for the next week.
Fair enough. It's hard to
we should have a competition, and then whoever comes up with the best name, that's it. We'll just use that from now on. But see, this comes back to it's less about the word autistic being a problem. It's the stigma that's applied to the word autistic that's the problem, and it is that it's that kind of 90 odd years of stigmatization that's associated with it, that people are scared of. And again, if you go back to that point about kind of species having subspecies, I mean, obviously if you equated dogs to humans, there are lots of different types of dogs, but they're all dogs. And there's no stigma attached to any of those subspecies of dog or subgroups of dogs. They're just dogs, you know. They look different, a Cocker Spaniel or an Alsatian or whatever. So why can't we be that as well? Why can't we have groups of different types of humans? Why do we all have to be the same? Nothing is the same. No.
The only things that are the same are manufactured, things that are produced. That's all. In nature, everything is different. Like every leaf on a tree is different. Like we know human beings are unique. And this is where, what's that called again? Cognitive bias, or the gap in, where you're like, we know we're unique, but yet we all think, we have to be the same. And it's like, what happens in between that?
Yeah.
Like, there's a huge space in between those two thoughts, and it's, we pride ourselves on being individual and being unique and all of this kind of stuff, and then it's like, but when it comes to our developments and to our achievements and to
we all have to be the same.
We all have to be the same, and it just makes no sense.
It doesn't make any sense at all, does it? And I think, I think we'll go deep into it now, but I think this is around how we've kind of evolved civilization and stuff, and the hierarchies that have come out of that, that we have to have a leader who has to tell us what to do, and we have to exist in certain ways in order to please other people and stuff and work together. And I think and I think autistic people have issues with that because we don't do hierarchies. You look at I did the first week of a training course I'm doing at the moment last night, and I was talking about this, and you think about how autistic children use parallel play really, really, really well. That's we don't sit and face each other. We don't play together like back and forth like that. We sit alongside each other and we do our own thing, or we sometimes come together and then we come apart, and that's a really good way for us to develop. And as autistic adults, when you look around us, we don't have hierarchies within the autistic community. It's kind of we're all on a level playing field. We all hit the same barriers. We all do similar things. We all have the same problems. Some people, like on social media, you might have a page that people follow, but that isn't because they see you as some kind of king or queen or dominant person. It's just that you've happened to say something that other people like. So it's a
or
level. Or didn't like. Yeah, you might follow them for that reason. But so it's a kind of, we don't have leaders as such. It's just some people talk more and are able to explain things maybe a little bit better. And that's all that is. That's not a hierarchy. But when you look at the non-autistic world, it is full of hierarchy. It's full of one person has to be here, another person has to be underneath them, and so on and so on and so on. And everybody has to know their place and stay in it. Whereas actually we come in and disrupt that because we don't like that, because it doesn't work for us, because we don't see, there's no logical reason why one person should be in charge of everybody else, so exactly. So it's kind of.
But it's so bizarre, isn't it? Like to think that like some people bow in front of another person.
Yeah. It's it's like, if you look at the Queen of England, it's like, when you look at documentaries about how the royal family in England have acted over the past 1,000 years, they're horrific murderers. They're not, to say anything else about, but they're glorified and put up on a pedestal or deferred to. And,
the only reason anybody has any wealth is because their ancestors,
stole it from somebody else. Yeah, and murdered them probably.
You know, yeah, like, I mean, there was a line in Game of Thrones, I think it was in the last season, and that's exactly one, I can't, characters' names are gone now, but that's exactly the point. It just stuck with me, because your mom was like, you're I don't know, I called him a Gurrier or whatever, you know, and he was like, but that's just what your ancestors were. And it was like, yeah, that's it, but because he
Yeah.
was king and what, you know, it was like people had forgotten all of that kind of stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
but I mean, it comes back to how we communicate with people as well. Like, we do communicate people, and that can be confusing for like, you know, people if they have a child who's like just talking like they're, you know, equal to an adult, because they are. I mean, I would talk to children like they're equal to me. I don't see them as like down here on some sort of pecking order. It's probably how we should be treating children anyway. But you know, it starts even in you know, the whole kind of childhood idea of like, who's my best friend? Like, you have to have a best friend, and who's the best friend? And it's like,
how many BFFFFs can you have?
you know, again, but it's like, can't we just be, you know, everybody get along? And I think, like, for me, like, a lot of the time, you know, just growing up, I kind of thought that's what life was. I thought we were all trying to figure this thing out together and help each other, you know, and that's kind of how I see life. But obviously not everybody else does, and it's quite competitive, and
yeah, and that's part of the problem. So this is why I am a great believer. I mean, this is like well off tangent now, but
I don't know what we even started talking about here.
No, but the you know, the why there is no real national organizations that represent autistic people. There is no national autistic group or anything like that that kind of that can make decisions and things and speak for all of us, because that's not how we work. I know ASAN exists, but that's a bit of an outlier for very, very different reasons. But you know, as I have this belief that we need lots of small autistic groups and organizations that come together and come apart. You know, we come together when we needed, when there needs to be kind of political maybe decisions or things that need challenging, but then we come apart and do our own autonomous thing. And it's because of that lack of hierarchy. We can't work within a hierarchy. It doesn't make sense to work within a hierarchy. It makes sense to use people's strengths and support people's weaknesses, but it doesn't make sense to take one person and make them dominant over other people. That doesn't work for us. So, you know, so we need this shoulder to shoulder kind of thing. And what you said there about treating children and stuff, most autistic parents, most outwardly open autistic parents, when I look at how they interact with their children, it's like that. It's not like that. It's not, you will do as I say and you will only do what I say. It's actually, you bring it, you are shoulder to shoulder with them. You talk to them like they're a person. You treat them, you don't take control over their lives and dominate what they do. You actually are shoulder to shoulder with them. You go through life together. You know, I've used the same line now 3 times in the last 2 days. We learn from as much from our children as they learn from us. So why shouldn't we stand shoulder to shoulder with them? Why should we dictate to them what they do?
Oh, absolutely. I agree with everything. You know, but it's because, you know, I mean, I have one child, and I don't treat her like an adult, but I treat her like an equal. And, you know, why should I be allowed to do certain things that she's not allowed to do? You know, so it's like, you know, I have to, you know, just let her be. I also think people think that their children, they own their kids or something like that. There seems to be this kind of like
a possessive kind of thing.
Yeah, that you're in charge of your child's path. And I'm like, I see my job as a parent is to basically protect my child, just to keep her safe.
Yeah.
Anything after that, you know, well, I mean, safe and happy, and anything after that is not my job. She gets to choose what she wants to do.
Yeah.
She gets to choose who she is. She gets to choose, you know, and that's like, you know, she might have a questionable sense of, you know, taste in clothes. We might have to go to the shop in pajamas and wellies, and that's okay. You know, because you can't go like, yes, you're in charge of your own body and your own self, and then, you know, be rigid
and then dictate terms. Yeah,
you know. And I think one of the most important things, all children, but particularly autistic kids and autistic girls, you know, is teaching them consent. And that happens at that stage, you know what I mean? And if you're trying to force somebody to wear something they don't want to wear, or they, you know, it's uncomfortable for them to wear, or just they don't want to wear it, you're telling them they don't have the power over their own body, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't think we think about our actions as parents,
Yeah.
and how the knock-on effect of that, you know, when you have a teenager then who, you know, doesn't know how to, you know, that they have the right to say no, and it's all connected.
Yeah,
you know. And I think
it
it's
is
really
completely. I mean, as parents, we are told constantly that we need to give our children boundaries, but we never think about the boundaries that they should be able to give us as well.
yeah.
We need boundaries as parents. We need to be told when to stop, when it's not appropriate, when we're doing something that isn't acceptable, and children should have the autonomy to be able to say that, and to be able to kind of to have the self-belief that we should have given them in order to be able that they can say no to us and know that no means no. They can do what they like, and it's the world that we live in is so messed up, and this is part of the problem. This is the conversation around neurodiversity and autism and autistic people is a really good analogy for the problems within humanity. You know, and it's kind of the conversations that we have never stop around being autistic. They always flow out into all these other problems that people have, and all these ideas and concepts that people have, because the challenges and barriers that we have in place are because of the messed up thinking that humanity has as a whole. And that's it's too big sometimes. It's too overwhelming sometimes.
Oh, yeah, it is too overwhelming at times. And like, there are days where I just feel ashamed to be human. You
Yeah.
know, I am. You know, you just see something new, or you're thinking about something, or something pops in the news, and I'm just like, I'm actually ashamed to be human. And it's just, I just think people are so caught up in that hierarchical thing, and
Yeah.
you know, and these ideas that we're fed of kind of like what you should have and what makes you successful. And whenever people are so busy chasing these things, and you know, we had lockdown in March, which yes was devastating to a lot of us, which was a massive change, but you know, I did kind of think, wow, this is such an opportunity for us as humans to just take stock of the way we're living our lives and make some changes. And I'm sure some people did, you know, but just slow the pace down, you know, spend time. What's wrong with spending time in your house with your family? You know, like, you know, it's like,
well, unless you don't like them, obviously, but
yeah, people do have difficulties with the families, but you know, I mean, in general, you know, what it's what we used to do. It was like, it just reminded me of my own childhood, and it's kind of like, you know, we spend a lot of time at home anyway because we like it here and it's our own environment. But you know, something you mentioned there about us playing side by side as kids, but also kind of like that we don't have that hierarchy, is really important for people, maybe employers, to understand as well, because this whole idea that autistic people can't work in a team, but I mean, you just actually described the idea that people have
real
of what
team
a team
working.
should be, which teams aren't. Like, come on, let's face it, there's always a leader in a team, you know, in a team. There's always that. What you described is actually kind of what a team is, it should be, or people kind of like imagine when they think of a team. And that's how that is how we work together. You know, I mean,
yeah. But then obviously from the outside looking in, it looks like we are disruptive, and it looks like we don't do teamwork. But in actual fact, we don't do teamwork like non-autistic people do teamwork, or what they call teamwork. You know, I mean, you look up the definition of teamwork in the dictionary and it will be what I just described. But teams don't work like that. Teams have people who decide that they need to be in charge, they need to dominate, and all of a sudden everybody falls into this hierarchy that falls underneath, you know, and people become subservient, and but we've been conditioned to feel like that. That's the thing. This is hundreds and thousands of years of conditioning and civilizing, and capitalism, you know, and all of those things kind of falling into place to make us think that this is how we need to be, and it isn't.
And why would you think? Because I know there's a few theories out there, kind of like, why is it that autistics are like this? I mean, I was thinking lately about our sensitivities, and you know, I don't know what most of us are sensitive to light being one of the big things, you know, and it's kind of like, you know, there are this kind of idea that autistics were the hunter-gatherers, or the kind of sentinels in, you know, back along in our history, you know, and we have these skills. And again, like, if people talk like about a sensory disorder, but it's like, but you know, at one point we needed these skills, and we probably still do as well, but the world has changed. Like, what's your opinion, kind of like where
I mean, obviously difficult to pinpoint exactly kind of what went on and why. I mean, very obviously we've been here for a very long time, as long as humans have been here, I would say, I would argue. Whether we all evolved out of the same kind of space or whether we evolved along different lines is, for whatever reason, something's happened there to create that difference. It's there for a reason.
Yeah.
I'm very much a believer in that. If you look back historically, neurodivergent, not just autistic people, but neurodivergent people have been the creators and the innovators. And I think alongside that, non-autistic people have developed to be the people that can really, really well use the tools that have been developed by the creators and the innovators. So for argument's sake, an autistic person has an idea and a concept about creating a tool, and then the non-autistic person takes that tool, learns how to use it, and uses it really, really effectively. So there is a duality there that's evolved alongside each other at some point, and I think it's probably when people started living in large groups, towns, cities, things like that, when you needed people to act in certain ways in order for that city to work. You know, you needed some people who were making the food, you needed production lines, you needed processes and things like that. And I think that's where the dissonance started to come in. And then as we've created more and more technologies, we are surrounded by man-made sensory environments. We are, you know, our input comes from a lot of man-made things which are unnatural. And I think because of the way that our sensory systems work, we are more prone to be accepting of natural sensory information, but we're not. That's excluded from us, and we're bombarded with this unnatural stuff. So that's created more problems. And then obviously over time, that's become harder and harder and harder to deal with. And then we're at this place now where you have people who think very differently and are overwhelmed very, very easily, and other people that think very differently and aren't overwhelmed as easily. So, you know, so you've got the group that aren't overwhelmed as much are the group that have naturally taken the power, because the other group are struggling and aren't able to cope as well. So, you know, so I don't think it's anything that's been planned or anything that's, you know, no one was like, let's exclude all the autistic people or anything like that. I think it's a natural development thing as we've evolved and become more civilized. Civilization doesn't work as well for us as it does work for them. Or at least the way civilization has evolved hasn't worked as well for us. So maybe at some point there needs to be a kind of, you know, we always joke about, you know, we need an island or another planet or something like that. But maybe that needs to happen. Maybe there does need to be a natural divergence. And that's not to say that we are better or worse than anyone, but there's going to come a point where we can't cohabit anymore. I think if things don't change, if things carry on the way that they have been going, we're not going to be able to exist alongside non-autistic people, and not because they're non-autistic people, but literally because we can't exist in the same world because it's too much. So that's kind of where I think it.
Well, I mean, it would be as lovely as it would be to go off to our own planet. Wouldn't it be great if the environment just changed to suit us, and then we could actually just live in this world and thrive in it? Because we do bring a whole lot of stuff to it. I mean, I'm just thinking, have we actually created this world ourselves now? Because
see, this is a problem. So maybe there's an element there of, but also if you look at how good we are at people pleasing and fawning, you know, I don't know if good is maybe the right word, but how skilled we are at doing it in a negative way. We've met the needs of the non-autistic people by creating an environment which suits them.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we've done that unwittingly, we've done that. That's a kind of, you know, and it is an inherent thing within autistic people to kind of to fawn and to want to be accepted and to want other people to feel okay, because when other people feel okay, we feel okay. And that's
also, you know, I think we like to share things.
Yeah.
It comes back to us not having that social hierarchy.
So not keeping it to ourselves, for our own betterment.
It's, you know, it's like if I think something new, I want to share it. If I think of something new, I want to tell somebody. It's like, you know, and actually, so that comes back to how we are with each other as well, like in our how we view the world.
And it's really easy. It's really easy to take advantage of that as well, though. That's the other thing, that we are vulnerable and we are easily taken advantage of, because we do want to share, we do want to give, and we do want to kind of make other people feel okay. But then other people can, and again, it's not necessarily that people are deviously wanting to take, you know, abuse us or take advantage of us, but it is really easy to do that. When someone's giving you the world, it's really hard to say no. You know, so if there are people that exist collectively that want to please other people, it's going to be really difficult for those people to kind of want to say, well, no, that's going to do you a disservice. And, you know, when actually, oh, that's making me feel a lot better, although I'll have more of that, please. So I think there's a kind of evolutionary kind of thing that's gone on that's unwittingly brought all of us to this situation. But we now,
I mean, there are cultures, you know, across the world that actually operate the way autistic culture does.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, if you look at spoons theory, it's like when you need someone to, the reason we run out of spoons is because we're not getting the input. You know, and we need that, and that's why we run out of things, because you can't constantly give without somebody giving to you, and that's the only way that our culture works.
Yeah.
You know, and then I think so, you know, autistic people, we're probably so traumatized a lot of the time anyway, we you know, we're not able to maybe reciprocate even if another autistic person does it for us.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, when you do look at kind of hunter-gatherer societies that still exist now, actually they work very much like that. And even within those groups, you know, we think about tribes and having leaders, but they don't have a leader. They might have a council or tribal leaders who are the people with the strengths to be able to do that. And that's not a hierarchy thing. They're not making decisions for the rest of the group, or like not taking away the autonomy of the rest of the group. They're actually looking at the needs of the group and working within that. And that's why one person isn't good enough for that. You need representation. And that's how we work. And that's missing from Western society. We've tried to recreate it with things like democracy and governments and things like that, but it gets too big. And you can't have well, you can't have a group of people that represents millions of people. It doesn't work well enough. It's not good enough for that.
But we don't have enough diversity, I think, in any.
No, we don't at all.
They're just very far out of touch with the people, and that's the problem. Do you know what I mean? That's one.
And everything's become extremes. That's the thing. And I think as we've moved on, those little bits of civilization evolution have become like really, really kind of wide and far apart and have gone to extremes. And I don't know if we can get that back. I don't know if it's too late to pull that back.
Well, you're talking to like the eternal optimist here.
Well, I know, but I'm the eternal pessimist. So.
I'm like, of course we can, Kieran. There's always a way. There's always a solution. So I think anything's possible. And that's not like my Pollyanna view either. It's I know, you know what, if you take these certain steps, this is what happens, you know, so we can. And I just think at the moment we have that opportunity with COVID, you know, and I think that was one of the things that kind of, you know, we saw like the beauty of human nature, people coming out of communities to help other people and all that. And then you just saw other sides of human nature as well. But, you know, again, a lot of that is fear-based. You know, that's how people act when they're afraid. But like, yeah, I don't know what the solution is. But I mean, look, I do know what the solution is. It's what I preach all the time. It's like we need, you know, to be seen as equals, and we need to, you know, change the environment to suit everybody. And I think if we are probably all a bit too busy at the moment, and we have too much input. I mean, like between being on our phones, TVs, whatever, you know, it's like it's instant. Life is way too demanding for everybody.
And too superficial because of that.
Yeah, totally. You know, and it's like, you know, you cannot be available 24/7 to everybody, you know, and it's like phones going off, you know, beeps, and it's like emails, and we just have, it's actually too much. It's too much, too many demands, I think, on us as humans right now, you know. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it is possible to change. I think it's always possible to change. You know,
I see. No, I mean, I do really, because otherwise I wouldn't do what I do. You know, if I didn't think it was possible, I'd have given up a long time ago.
Yeah,
but maybe it's kind of, I need to think it's possible as well. I think that's really important, and to bring it back to what, you know, we should be talking about, which is the conference. Things like this are tangible possibilities. The conference is a tangible possibility. It shows that it's a group of people coming together to show that there is another way, and that it's admitting that something isn't working isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, it just means we need to be changed. It needs something need to change. And we even have the solutions and the, you know,
Yeah.
how we can go about it. But yeah, I think something like the conference actually kind of is just, actually people who can, I know, look, it's going to be online, it's going to be really informative day, it's going to be great, but like we cannot recreate the atmosphere of, you know, the real life conference that we had last year, and we weren't there for, sorry. But it was just like, you could feel like I had 330 people or something in the room. You could just feel the glow, you know, just people felt so relaxed. People felt them, they could be themselves, you know, it doesn't matter whether they were autistic or not, why they'd come to it. It just, and it was like, but this is just, you know, what it is to make people feel welcome, you know. I mean, yeah, obviously paid attention to lighting and sound as much as you could, you know, at that event, but like, you know, the lighting was kind of a big thing for me. But it was also kind of like letting people know that they were welcome, that they were, it was a friendly atmosphere. You know, I mean, that's really, I mean, that's when we talk about the environment. Like for me, I'm like, we need to start talking about the social environment, because that's what we need. You know, I mean, that's the most important thing, because if you look at how the social environment treats us now, you know, no wonder we can't cope with everything else, because, you know, feeling like you don't belong here and you're not wanted, you know, is obviously going to make dealing with everything else difficult, you know? So,
No, I do. It's kind of, it's that again, I think it's about the hierarchies again, isn't it? And it's about that non-judgmental environment where you know you're going to walk in there and be accepted. And as people who are members of a marginalized group, that's a very rare feeling, where you know you're going to be able to walk in a room and be yourself, and you're not going to have to modulate yourself or change who you are or how you're acting, or, you know, that you don't have anything to be scared of. That's that fear is taken away, that you walk into a room where there's no fear, and you're not picking up fear from other people either. And that's really important, because we do
or
pick up
listening to some speaker trying to talk about
yeah
how to make you a bit more normal, how to engage you. Yeah, how to look beyond our behaviors, Kieran, and to understand that we are people.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like so many conferences that I mean, the autism show that we have in England, which is a kind of National Autistic Society, and there's a Autism Eye, which is a not very nice magazine that run the autism show, and they do platform autistic speakers, and you go there, and Damien Milton's Park quite often has a stand there where the participatory research group, where they'll get up and they'll introduce kind of their research and stuff. And it's, you go there and you're at that side of the conference and you're listening to these talks and you're feeling really good, you're feeling validated, you feel like, you know, we can change the world and it's brilliant. And then that finishes and you start wandering around the stands and your heart starts to sink that little bit lower, because there's behavioral therapies and special schools and stands where they're selling multicolored flashing sensory balls and things, and then you wander around to the other side of the conference where there's another speaker and they're talking about which therapies are best to change us, or, you know, like how successful they've been in making autistic children you know, go through school without any problems, without mentioning that they then fall apart at the end of school, and, you know, things like that. And it's kind of, you have that validation and then you are instantly dehumanized, and you walk into an environment like that knowing that those two things are going to happen, and it's awful. It's absolutely awful. And you know that the crowds of people that have listened to autistic speakers are then going to get up, go to that other part of the conference and hear that other talk, and because it feels safe and normal and that's the usual thing that they're used to, they're going to listen to that and remember that more than they are the speakers on the other side. And that needs to stop. That absolutely needs to stop. And this is why I know some people might look at Awesome Conference and think, well, that's really one-sided. There's no other perspectives there. Well, in actual fact, this is a perspective that has been silenced and trodden on and stamped on for far too long.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you know, but I also, like, I'm hardly going to have a conference anti-autistic people.
Well, exactly.
It's like, it is from our...
But that's the problem. They don't see themselves as anti-autistic, though, do they? That's the problem. They see themselves as helping. They think that they're helping. And in actual
Yeah,
fact, they're
I
not.
have been, you know, some people have accused me of kind of promoting my own ideas. I'm like, well, yeah. It's like, pro-autistic ideas is kind of what we're about. It's about changing lives and not just for autistic people, but for families, you know, who have autistic kids and have autistic relations, employers who want to, you know, actually, I mean, look, you know, you just talked about how innovative we are, you know, but yet, you know, you shared some research there recently. Is it 50% of employers wouldn't hire an autistic person?
Wouldn't hire a neurodivergent person.
And you see, like, that makes no sense because, but again, well, it does totally, because of course, if you're dyslexic, people just think you can't read instead of looking at the way the dyslexic brain actually works and how creative it is and the way it does view things. And if you're, you know, same again with any neurodivergent, you know, it's like people think it's going to hold you back, but actually, we are the people who are bringing the world forward. So the fact that we're the people who bring the world forward and no one wants to employ us, that's like, you know,
it's ridiculous, isn't it? It's like shooting yourself in the foot. Absolutely shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah,
but it's because
we want to stay just run of the mill where we are. We don't want any new thinkers coming in, people who can revolutionize our organization, maximize profits. Why would you want to employ those people?
It's that fear again, though, isn't it? So if you take that dyslexic person and you think, well, they can't read or write in traditional ways, they need other avenues of communication in order to be able to express themselves. Well, that means that I have to change the whole direction of how my business works, and it's disruptive and blah, blah, blah. So it's easier just to push them aside and get someone in who maybe isn't as good at the job, but they work in the way that I want them to, you know, and that's wrong thinking. That's problematic thinking, because you're missing out then on someone who can make a huge difference to your organization or your business or whatever, just because you're not prepared to meet them halfway.
Maybe it is, though, a difference in the way we actually think, because I love being challenged. Like, I love when someone says something to me that makes me think in a new way.
And then you go off and learn about it and want to learn more about it. And
but perhaps that is just a neurodivergent thing or an autistic thing. Maybe people don't have the same response.
Maybe from a non-neurodivergent perspective, maybe they fear more.
Yeah.
Maybe they're more scared. I mean, it's kind of you if you think about the difference between monotropic brain and polytropic brain. So we would be described as being monotropic because we, you know, something catches our attention and we run towards it 150 miles an hour and want to know everything about it, kind of thing. Whereas non-neurodivergent people tend to be polytropic, which means that lots of things catch their attention at the same time. So they can't invest as much time in all of those things because they can't, you know, literally you can't. There's too much multitasking going on. So they have to look at things very superficially. And when you look at things superficially, you don't have as much control over that thing. So then that becomes a thing that becomes uncomfortable, and it makes you feel a bit funny and makes you feel a bit anxious. And then there's fear sets in about it. So maybe it's just that their fear works differently to our fear because our brains work differently to their brains.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
So you're going to go off and think about that now, which is an exact example of what we just said, though.
Yeah, but
and other people would hear that and would be like, "Oh no, that's far too deep. I'm not going to." See, a non-autistic person would think that's far too complicated. I can't think about that. I'm going to go and make a cup of tea. Whereas we would be like, "No, stuff the cup of tea. Let's go and find all that we can about what that person just said." And that's the difference. There's the key difference there.
Yes, I think there is that fear of kind of delving beneath the surface on a lot of conversations, you know, because people use it kind of like, oh, you're very political, or don't talk about, this isn't the place and time, and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, but why isn't it the place and time to talk about child abuse? It's like, we not be talking about this all of the time, you know. So, and it is kind of, Kieran, I better let you go. I can see your little...
my little girl's hands waving in the corner. She's just being nosy. She's not...
No, she's been so patient and so good. I just need time. This is, again, look, we'll do a short chat, and it's literally an hour and a half. No, to be fair, thank you so much for your time. And you've got little... she's got little curls, hasn't she? You've been so good, so patient while Daddy's been talking.
She's a good girl.
So Kieran, we is there anything else you want to say just before we finish up? And like,
I don't know. Do you want to quickly look at the comments and see if there's anything anybody wants to?
Yes, I do. I'll have a quick look, but I think we've kind of called out most of them. Let me see. I don't think there's oh, might be one. So a lot of them are just comments, not questions as such. Oh, and people talking. I'm loving this talk. Oh, thank you. Brilliant. Great. So that's it. Yeah, just lots. It's mainly comments, very little questions. It's all good. So yeah, thanks to everybody for joining us live, and for anybody who's going to watch this later. I think they probably knew it would be a very long chat, Kieran. When they
Tickets are still available though, aren't they?
Yes, tickets are still available. Yeah, like I mean, they're selling fast now. So if people do want to sign up, I would do quickly. We have 2 types of tickets as well, because if anyone's watching this live and they can't make obviously 9 to 5 on a Sunday, mightn't suit everyone's timetable, they can sign up for a recording as well and get lifetime access and watch it whenever. And I suppose, you know, it is an online conference, which makes it very autism friendly, because you know, friendly to everybody. You can like sit at home, you know, watch it in the comfort of your own home. I'll be wearing my slippers. So well, that's it. But Kieran, thank you so much for joining me today. I have to watch it back. I think we just talked about, I don't know, so many different things. But it's brilliant. I love talking to other autistic people. I just feel more alive. My brain is more alive after talking to other autistic people. It really is. So thank you. And I will see you on the 15th. So it's only a week and a half away now.
It is.
I know. Be ready
it's
to
exciting.
stay. If anybody would like to hear more of Kieran, it'll be more concise.
It will.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited because I know you sent me on your presentation already, because we have Irish Sign Language interpreters, so they want to have a look at that beforehand, but I didn't want to read it. I want to just wait till the day to hear it live, you know, because that's the thing. It is going to be such a cool day, and I think it's we've such a, you know, different range of speakers talk about different things, that it'll be great. We'll all be on a high again after it for another while if people just go until the new year. So thanks a million, Kieran, and
thank you very much.
talk to you soon. Cheers.